I can tell you that's why that race is so sweet, because every single car, all 33 cars and drivers and teams that are there, all took their best shot at it. So if you won on that day, you beat everybody with their best car, their best engine, their best driver, their best crew chief, like everything you could stack the deck in your favor, you do for that race. And if you come out on top on that, it's a big deal. The Super Bowl or the World Series are big, but you don't see the players having to do a parade before those things, and the level of interviews and access and autograph sessions before having to perform at their highest level on the biggest stage for their sport. He hops in the car for the first time. They put him on a skid pad, and right away he's locking tires and skidding and all over the place. And I was like, oh God, I am so screwed. Because he's not afraid of this thing, and looks like he's pretty good at it.
Uh-huh.
And so then that was it. Like from that point, there was no going back. Hi, I'm Bryan Herta, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
What a pleasure to have a race strategist, former race car driver, someone at the center of the IndyCar world in many, many different ways, including a close connection to one of our former guests on the program. Bryan, thank you. Thank you for being on Cars and Culture.
Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on with you.
How's the off season treating you? Let's start there. There really is no off season in IndyCar. I know it's not very long, but how is it treating you?
No, it's, the off season is the time to do all the stuff you didn't have time to do during the season, really. For us, we sell all our cars every year, our Hyundai, Elantra, and TCR cars. We buy new cars. We prep and build those cars. So that was a busy time. We also bought a new shop in Indianapolis, and so we're moving here very, very shortly. Right here at the very end of January, beginning of Feb, we're moving. And so there's just been a lot going on, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I feel lucky I get to wake up and do something I love. So it's a lot, but it doesn't feel like work most of the time.
By the way, congratulations on an order. You completed the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge season with a 1-2 finish at Road Atlanta in October. What were your thoughts on the year? How did you think that the year finished out?
It's interesting. We've had such a tremendous run of success in the Michelin Pilot Challenge, where we've won, I think, we've won 5 consecutive driver championships, 4 consecutive manufacturer championships coming into last season. And last year we won the manufacturer championship for a 5th consecutive year, but we just missed out on the driver championship. We finished 2nd and 3rd in the drivers championship and the team championship. So it was a little bit weird for us because you become accustomed to a certain level of success, but I think also really good for us. Sometimes, you need that challenge put in front of you to really motivate you and the team, the drivers. I know we're coming out swinging this year and looking to just raise our level in every area.
What surprised you about the year?
I don't think I was really surprised too much by anything. I think the Audi JDC team that ended up lifting the championship from us had been very, very strong, was in a position a year ago to win it going in the last race. So we knew that was going to be our main competitor, and that proved to be true. They came out very strong early in the season, won a bunch of races, and really got us on our back foot. And we did close towards the end of the year, but just ran out of time. So, like I said, I hate to lose more than anything. But I want to also look at it as we didn't lose. We had an opportunity here to focus more and try and make ourselves better as a team.
It's amazing to me when I look at your own career and I think about where we are today, and time flying as it does, like a race car, almost 2 decades that you've been involved as an owner since retiring from racing. Can you believe how fast it's all gone?
It is hard for me to believe because it does seem just yesterday that I was throwing the helmet on and getting out there myself. So It does go by quickly. Not just in terms of time, but I think about our youngest son who's now in high school, who never saw me race. He was basically born at the end of my driving career, and so he only knows me as dad and race car team owner. Of course, our two older kids remember me driving, so it's great. I feel really, really fortunate. As I said, like I grew up as a kid wanting to be a race car driver. I got to live out that dream. I never thought I wanted to be a team owner until really the time was coming to an end in my driving career. And suddenly, that became really appealing. And I'm so glad I took that leap because it's been hugely rewarding. And, I still love the sport and I get to compete in it in a different way and really share those experiences now with a great group of people that we've assembled at Bryan Herta Autosport and, built, quite a strong success record to date.
It's also amazing to me, Bryan, that next year will be a decade since you won the Indy 500 with when you partnered with Michael Andretti in a car that was driven by rookie Alexander Rossi. That is hard to imagine that was pretty much 10 years ago.
I know, I know. Like this sport's relentless, and that it keeps coming at you. Right? There's always another race, and there's always the next thing to prepare for. And when you say things like that, it's funny because I never sit back and reflect or think backwards like that until somebody points it out, and then you realize, like, holy moly, that was a long time ago, and a lot has happened since then.
Right, right. Let's talk a little bit about the Indy season to come. And soon enough, we will be in St. Petersburg. It will be upon us. What is it that you're looking for as you prepare this off season for next season in the NTT IndyCar series?
Well, in my role with Andretti Autosport, I think the thing that I felt within the team at the end of last year is we were really coming on strong. We'd been strong on street courses and in certain areas for several years in the series and won races and in those particular types of races. But at the end of the season, seeing how competitive we were on ovals, short ovals, super speedway, seeing Colton get that win at Nashville and get his first oval win. There's just a general sense of, I don't want to say confidence, but optimism that we're on a good trajectory and we've got to keep working hard, but there's a lot of good things that are possible for us this coming year in IndyCar.
And the 500 itself, we've talked to so many drivers on this program about how elusive and alluring the Indy 500 is at many different levels. You started in it 5 times, the last time in 06, 3 top 10 finishes, third in 05. You know what it's like there. Give our listeners a sense of how the year really, especially the beginning of the year, builds to May.
It's the elephant in the room every single day, and when we're racing in St. Petersburg or we're racing in Birmingham, Alabama, and Barber, we still have kind of one eye on that race because it is the big one. It's the one that everybody wants to win. So, we do put a lot of effort into it. A lot of our development, wind tunnel time, everything goes into really trying to be at our very best. But having been part of 2 winning efforts there, and I can tell you that's why that race is so sweet because every single car, all 33 cars and drivers and teams that are there, all took their best shot at it. So if you won on that day, you beat everybody with their best car, their best engine, their best driver, their best crew chief, like everything you could stack the deck in your favor, you do for that race. And if you come out on top on that, it's a big deal.
And everybody who's been on this program has described, I want to put your driver helmet on here for a minute, but has described how arduous and difficult it is from a driver's perspective. Give me the driver's perspective. Give me the owner's perspective or the strategist's perspective.
Yeah, from a driver's standpoint, it's brutal. It's a mentally challenging We call it the month of May. It's really just a couple weeks now, but it feels like a year. And the way it builds, that every day you practice and then the weather changes and you think you're happy with your car and suddenly you're not anymore. And as you're building up through the end of the first week, heading into qualifying, you start trimming the car out and putting it really more and more and more on edge, to the point that when we go out and do these qualifying runs, we're relying almost completely on the grip from the tires, to the point that you couldn't do a second run on a set of tires. They just don't have enough grip to hold the car to the track. So those are some harrowing laps for the drivers. You're really holding on the white knuckle moment, getting through qualifying. And then after you've kind of run that gauntlet, now you got to get ready to race, and the preparation for that, and the greatest spectacle in racing, the biggest single day sporting event, all that goes into that. There are hundreds of thousands of people there, and the pomp and circumstance, and you get kind of torn into interviews, and then there's parades and public drivers meetings, and it's really a meat grinder for the drivers. And to try and keep your head on straight, keep focused, it's unique in sports. I mean, the Super Bowl or the World Series are big, but you don't see the players having to do a parade before those things, and the level of interviews and access and autograph sessions before having to perform at their highest level on the biggest stage for their sport. So I think as a driver, remember those things a lot, and still to this day have just so much respect for all the drivers, because of the unique challenge of that place, and the mental distractions and things that it throws at you, and you have to close all that stuff out.
It's crazy. You were born in the shadow of General Motors Tech Center, Warren, Michigan. Were you always going to be a car guy?
So I guess I was, but not because I was born right there. It wasn't until we moved to Connecticut when I was 6, and we had just moved into this neighborhood, and we didn't know anybody, and a neighbor invited us to go to the local Saturday night racetrack. It was in Danbury, Connecticut. They raced open wheel modifies, and my dad took me along, and that was my first exposure to racing in person, and it just hit me right away. And since then, I don't remember ever wanting to do anything else. I used to dress up as a race car driver every year for Halloween. We get a track suit and all with soap patches on it, and I'd carry a helmet around to collect my candy in. So I was committed, except one year I was a stormtrooper. Star Wars got me one year, but every other year I was a race car driver. So I never wanted to do anything else. And that's, I think, one of the things that I feel very lucky and is unique about, my life is, I kind of had this dream as a 6-year-old kid. Not many people get to do the thing that they dreamed of doing when they were 6. And so, again, I think fortunate or lucky or whatever are words that I always ascribe to the things I've been able to do in my life.
And you really got your starter, had your first real success in Barber Formula Fords, right? And the Barber Saab Pro Series. Is that sort of where it all started?
Well, even before that, I wanted to race go-karts when I was young. Mm-hmm. And my dad wasn't particularly mechanically inclined. He was a commercial real estate guy, so he was hesitant for a while. He bought me a BMX bike, and I raced BMX bikes until I was 12. And then he thought that would, solve the problem, but it didn't. And when I was 12, I finally wore him down, and we bought a go-kart and started racing go-karts. And, I was lucky, started winning races. And, by the time I was then 18, a friend of the family sent me to this Skip Barber. It was like a introductory course. It was like a couple hours out at Riverside International Raceway, where you basically go out and they just show you the cars and they let you drive it behind an instructor for a couple laps. But, then they set the hook at the end of it and say, hey, would you like to do more of this? And of course I would. And that is really through the Skip Barber program and then their race series, and winning, that I was able to kind of start moving up the ladder, because we were complete outsiders to the sport. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't know how you got into it. We didn't know how you really followed that dream. But by that time, we were living in California, and my dad and I used to go to the Long Beach Grand Prix every year, and that became the dream, was to race at the Long Beach Grand Prix. And really, that's what led me to IndyCar. It wasn't that I wanted to be in IndyCars to race at Long Beach. I wanted to be in IndyCars because that's what you had to race to be in the big race at Long Beach. I didn't know about the Indy 500 or all the other races until much later on.
Hmm. And what was the first big break that you remember after that?
Well, the sport is tough. It takes a lot of money to get through just the junior formula. It's big investment. So families make big sacrifices. My family made big financial sacrifices to support my career, but also many others helped me along the way. And so I had a lot of, let's say, small and medium breaks early on, where just family, friends, people who, saw the passion, determination, the dream, and wanted to help be part of that with me, helped me along the way. But then the big break came after I won the Indy Lights Championship, uh, partway into the start of the 1994 IndyCar season. Excuse me. And AJ Foyt called me out of the blue
Hmm.
and said, Bryan, this is AJ Foyt. And I didn't believe him. I really thought it
Wow.
was my friends messing with me. Who had AJ Foyt calling you out of the blue on your bingo card, when you're early 20s kid. But he did. And he offered me the chance to come drive for him in 1994 at the Indianapolis 500. So that was my first IndyCar race. That was my big break. AJ gave it to me, which is sort of a fairy tale way to break
Wow.
in sport, in the top level.
That month you turned 24 years old.
I turned 24 that year, which I was young back then. Nowadays these kids are so much more prepared and they come in such an earlier age. But back then I was still the young kid. I was 23 when I started, and turned 24 during that month of May. So, I think I always look back, and AJ Foyt, was the guy. Even after I'd won the Indy Lights Championship, I didn't have a ride. I hadn't found a way to move up into IndyCar. And AJ was the one that took a chance on me and gave me my big break.
Wow. What was that like? You're sitting at the starting, you're in the driver's parade. You're, the green flag drops. You're 24 years old. You're driving for AJ Foyt. You're at the Indianapolis 500. I mean, good gracious.
Well, the drinking through a fire hose analogy works. You go from, the longest race I'd ever done was Indy Lights, was 75 miles. And you go from that into the biggest race in the world and everything that goes with that. I hadn't even done an IndyCar race. I had no idea what to expect, what I was getting into. As a matter of fact, when AJ called and gave me the opportunity, I was nervous whether Indy was the right place to start. Like that's a big ask for a rookie driver to try and learn on the biggest stage. I actually called two guys. I called Bobby Rahal, and I called Mario Andretti, guys who I'd met when I was racing Indy Lights and who obviously I had a ton of respect for. And I said, look, here's the opportunity. Is this crazy? Should I do this? And both of them said, look, you can't choose when your chance comes. You just have to take it and make the most of it. And, Mario especially, he said, look, I'll tell you, like I was telling Mike or Jeff, uh, you know, and he just kind of talked me through the whole thing and made me feel comfortable with, okay, these veteran guys are going to accept me. They understand. They were rookies once. They know what it was like to be where I am on the outside trying to break in. And that was great. And that was actually, ironically, really the start of my relationship with the Andretti family as well, with Mario, and then Michael, and a friendship with Michael that extended through the driving years and ended up with me driving for him, and then being a partner with him, and now my son driving on the Andretti global team. So it's funny when you look back how like one conversation was like the start of something.
And you nailed the top 10 in that first year at being just 24 years old.
Yeah, I finished ninth.
Right.
Uh, I don't know how I didn't crash. I tried to crash like 5 times that race. I still remember I was young and dumb and didn't know what I shouldn't be trying to do or couldn't get away with, but somehow I did. And I finished ninth, and like I remember like I was disappointed because you just want to do as well as you can and you want to win. And I just come off an Indy Light season where I'd won, almost everything. Not that I expected to go out and win the Indy 500 as a rookie, but I remember like a reporter running up to me in pit lane when I was getting out of the car and said, Bryan, you just finished ninth in your first Indy 500. What does that mean? And I didn't know what to say exactly. I think I said something along the lines of, well, I guess it means 8 guys beat me today. And that's how I felt. That's how I felt.
Sure.
And that's how I still feel to this day. Is that's why I love this sport, is because the competition is pure, and you get a report card every race. You know how
That's
you
right.
did. You know,
That's
you,
right.
you know how you finish. Like so few things in life are like that, but racing, you know exactly how you did.
You end up driving for Bobby and David Letterman. I mean, we've had Bobby on this
Yeah,
program. What was that like? I mean, Letterman at one point had even coined a phrase for you in your driving, Hertamania. You
Hertamania.
know,
He did. So David's great. He massive, massive fan of the sport. What a unique experience to get to be a part of the team that he was partners on, that get to know him and have a relationship with him. Really, it's sort of the zenith of his career and his fame. He was the big dog at that time for late
yeah,
night TV, and he was great. Like he would call me once a week, sometimes more, and just talk racing. We never talked about show business, his show. He just wanted to talk about racing, and that was his passion and his love. And he was, a lot of people don't know, this is before the F1 races were live. Uh, he would drive at 3 or 4 in the morning from his house to ESPN studios in Bristol, Connecticut, to watch the Formula One races at the studio there live. He was
really.
that big a fan, and he would come to as many races as he could, and he was just very, very great to myself, to my wife, to my family. It was a great time in our lives. Bobby, I had a great time driving on that team. Like I felt like family when I was there. And I remember the first time David invited us to his studio in New York where they filmed the Late Show. And Jeanette and I, my wife, we went, and I learned some things. One is he doesn't let anybody that he knows sit in the audience, because he
Mm,
didn't want to look up and like recognize or like have him throw him off, I guess. So we sat in the green room, which is really cool because we met all the guests right before they
yeah.
were about to go out and see all that. And then after the show was finished, after they finished filming, we came out and we sat and talked with David. Got to take some pictures at the desk, and I remember, it's funny. I said, David, hey, how about a picture of Jeanette and I? And he said, yeah, no problem. And I handed him the camera, and he just kind of looked at me, and then he smiled and laughed. So we didn't take a picture with David that day, but I have a picture. I like it because the irony of it, I have a picture of my wife and I taken by David Letterman, but we're the only ones that know he took it.
You've been with a whole bunch of legends, and you just mentioned AJ Foyt there for a minute. What are your memories of working alongside AJ, besides that
Uh,
first phone call?
well, you know, AJ is as advertised. Like he's bigger than life. He's got such a personality. Um, the thing I learned on the inside was, what a soft spot he had, what a teddy bear he is.
Hmm.
I remember when you're there in the garage on a rain day and you're talking to people. And I was uh, surprised how many stories of people had of things that AJ had done privately to help them, like paid a medical bill,
Mm.
uh, helped somebody's mom who was having a hard time. He did a lot of that kind of thing that he never talked about. He's never taken credit for. So that was kind of interesting to get to know the man a little bit. You know, we all know AJ, the fiery personality, and he was all those things too. I remember the first day I was practicing, and back then we had this pop-off valve on top of the engine controlled how much boost you could have. And these were issued by USAC, which was the sanctioning body. And the first day we had a not very good pop-off valve, so we weren't getting a lot of boost pressure. The engine was a little down. And I remember we came back to the garage and they took it off the top of the engine. And AJ walked straight over to the USAC office. The door was open. And I remember watching him throw the pop-off valve through the door, preceding him walking in behind it. Needless to say, we had a different pop-off valve for the rest of the month and all worked out. So, but he knew how to use his, his persona, his personality to really get what he wanted. But he also knew that people loved that part of him. He understood very much where his appeal was, and so I learned a lot just watching him. Less of
Mm.
what he said, more of just observing. A legend of the sport, and how he carried himself, how he discussed things, approached situations, how he dealt with people was really impressive for me.
Mario Andretti, Michael Andretti. Give me your view on your close
Oh,
proximity to the two of them.
so Michael's to this day a good friend. I don't know. I don't even know how we became friends when we were driving, because Michael famously wasn't really friendly with very many of his
Right.
co-drivers. He just wasn't. He was an intense competitor, and somehow we just became friends, and we ended up becoming very close, and we vacationed together. Our kids spent time together. Our wives and kids spent time at the track when we were practicing, or you spent a lot of time out there all day, and we became very close. And obviously getting to know Mario through that. And I still pinch myself because guys like him, like I have his number. When he calls me on the phone, like I still get giddy because the name comes up, and it's just like it's Mario, right? And I still have that sort of childlike reverence for him. Um, but then I also get to talk to him about regular stuff, and one of my favorite things is to sit in the Andretti hospitality area at the IndyCar races, when he's sitting there and he's alone, and just sit down, and he'll start telling stories, and like he just has so many. I think we could do that every day for 50 years, and I'd never hear all the stories he had to tell. But just love that man, that family. I respect everything they represent for the sport. They've been really important in my life and my career, as well as now my son Colton's. So just feel fortunate to, I guess, have crossed orbits and been able to, call them, family.
Yeah. Wonderful. We had your son Colton on this program about maybe a
Did you?
year or year and a half ago. Yeah. So from a trailer at Indianapolis, he was holding his iPhone and we did the interview. What an inspiring story. What an inspiring story he is. Tell me a little bit about his journey and what all of it means to you.
Um, you know, I, he was the kid. He was 2 weeks old the first time he went to a racetrack, Long Beach Grand Prix. He was born.
He
He was
told us
born
that.
March. Yeah, he was born March 30th, 2000, and Long Beach is the second week in April every year. And we brought him to Long Beach. We had our motorhome there. My wife brought him, and he stayed in the motorhome. But we like to joke he was almost born at a racetrack.
Right.
And I have three kids, oldest daughter, Callie, Colton, and then our youngest son, who's a freshman in high school now, Cade. And they all grew up around racing. They all love it and appreciate it, but he was the one that wanted to do it. And it was never really a question. I think people assume that like I pushed him into a go-kart or something because that's what I did. But if you ask most drivers, they would tell you that they would be very happy and almost probably prefer if their kids didn't want to race.
Right.
Because you know the hardship of it, you know the emotional up and downs, and you know the danger of it. So it was not something that I pushed on him, but he just always wanted to be that. He wanted to be a race car driver. He wanted to go to every single race weekend that we would take him to. And he bugged me. And, when he was 6, I got him his first go-kart and we started going to the track. And, it was a great time in my life that it was lucky timing that, I stopped driving in 08 and he was just starting to really get active in karting. And so I was suddenly available. When you're driving, you're just gone all the time, going to races, appearances and tests. And I was suddenly available and home. And so the timing was just so fortuitous that I got to spend the next couple of years really going to the racetrack with Colton. I did a lot of the work on the go-karts in the garage. It was something we did together and that I really enjoyed. And the way I looked at it, that was the end goal, right? There was no like, what's next? At that time, he's 8 years old, right? I just want to go to the go-kart track with my son and do something that he enjoyed and I enjoyed. And so we had these just amazing experiences and we started traveling to kart races and, we became very close because of all that, time together. So that was a great time for me in my life. And then as he continued to progress and do better and better, he wanted to race cars. And when he was 12, he convinced me, he found out that you could go to Skip Barber driving school as a 12-year-old, which I had no idea. Like it seemed crazy to me. But he heard somebody had done it. So he said, if I get straight A's in school, can I do the Skip Barber school? And now he was a good student, but he'd never gotten straight A's. So I made that thinking I was safe. It was the first and last time he got a straight A report card. He was motivated. So I remember I took him to Road Atlanta. We signed up for the 3-day school, and I was a mess. I was so nervous. I had this knot in my stomach. I'm driving my 12-year-old to a racetrack to put him in a race car. I thought I must be the worst parent in the history of parenting. But I made this deal and he was determined. And I remember having this conversation with him in the car on the way to the track. And, I thought it might be a lot for him. I thought it might not go well. And so I was just like, look, we'll see how it goes. And like, if you're not comfortable or it's not going well, that's okay. We can just go home and we'll come back next year or something. And he hops in the car for the first time. They put him on a skid pad, and right away he's locking tires and skidding and all over the place. And I was like, oh God, I am so screwed. Because he's not afraid of this thing, and looks like he's pretty good at it. And so then that was it. Like from that point, there was no going back. And then I guess, as they say, the rest is history.
You must be amazed at how well he's performing, and really how his name circulates in all kinds of other interesting areas.
I'm so proud of him. Proud of what he's done in the race car and on the racetrack. He's accomplished. He's still only 20. He's a young man. He's still only 24 years old, and he's
sounds familiar. A 24-year-old.
Yeah, well, he's accomplished more already at 24 than I did my entire career. So, when he first started in IndyCar, people used to ask me a lot, do you think he's going to be better than you were? And nobody asks anymore.
Nobody asks anymore.
That's good. That's a good thing. I want him to do better, to be better, to have, more success than I did. And so I couldn't be happier, prouder. But the thing I was going to say is, the thing that his mom and I are really the most proud of is like he's a good human. He's
Yeah.
he's a good kid. He's kind. He's thoughtful, and his friends are still his buddies from high school. Yeah, he hasn't changed, and that's what you want is you want your kid to have as much success as possible, but you hope and pray that that success doesn't change who they are, and and so far he's been able to kind of walk that tightrope, and that I guess is probably the thing I'm most proud of.
Wonderful. Another great human in your world is a gentleman who was on our program recently in a two-part series that we aired because his story is so remarkable, and it's Robert Wickens. And I know you are very close to Robert and all of his efforts, and in fact, you have some big ideas and some big dreams that could happen for Robert one day. Do you want to talk about your relationship with Robert Wickens?
Yeah, absolutely. Robbie's somebody that obviously has become a great source of inspiration for a great many people, and myself certainly included. I think most people know, he kind of burst onto the IndyCar scene as a rookie,
Yep.
was having a breakout season, was sort of the toast of the town, and sort of 2/3 of the way through the season had a devastating accident at Pocono. Had a number of injuries. At the time, I remember when I was at the track, I was working with Marco Andretti, and you remember those moments. We knew it was a really big accident. You don't know how the driver is, the status of the driver, and the longer it goes with no updates, the
Mhm.
more that sort of fear starts rising. um, and in the end, of course, Robert sustained some really devastating injuries, some paralysis. Thank God, he survived what was a really big accident. But right away, he set about uh, taking on as a challenge, moving forward, and he wanted to get back in a race car. And it took him a couple of years of really hard work and physical therapy to get himself back where that was even a physical possibility. Uh, and I didn't really know Robert very well prior to that. Colton actually knew him from when Colton was living in Europe and Robert was racing over there. They had crossed paths and knew each other from that time. But I only had casually met Robert. But as circumstances had it, we had a driver, a paralyzed driver who was driving with hand controls in one of our Hyundai race cars, a guy named Michael Johnson. And so we're probably one of the only people in the country, if not the world, that has a hand control race car. And so I just called Robert out of the blue and said, hey, we've got this car. Would you like to come out and do a track day and just drive it, have some fun? And he jumped at the opportunity without hesitation. And we set it up at Mid Ohio. And what was like, I thought he was just kind of hop in for a few laps just to have some fun, turn into, satellite media people, showing up. And and it again, just became obvious right away that he wasn't in it to have fun or to have an experience. He was in it to, I guess, maybe prove to himself, but also everybody else that he could get back in a car and could do it at a high level. And we just kind of at the end of that, because I didn't want to push him, I didn't know where his mindset was. We just kind of let it set after that day for a little while. And then, finally we kind of came back together and I said, do you want to try and race this thing? Would you be interested in that? And he thought a little bit more about that one, but he said, you know what? Yes, I absolutely do. And so I went to our partners at Hyundai and said, hey, this is kind of a really cool thing. Uh, we need some money because we gotta reinvent this hand control for Robert. And, there's a whole bunch of extra stuff that goes with it, right? We need to bring, there's extra people involved. Or, we need an extra guy going over the wall just to lift him in and out of the car. And they jumped at it. They loved the story. They said, we want to be part of this. And right away, I think he finished on the podium in his very first race with us at Daytona International Speedway. and what a fairy tale. And he ended up winning races, uh, winning championship, and really became a sensational story for everybody. And as that evolved, and we continue to evolve the hand control around him, it's really interesting, the hand control project for us, because none of us had any experience with it outside of the system that Michael Johnson had originally brought to us. But we continue to evolve it. What I learned was a hand control system isn't universal for drivers or people with spinal injuries, because everybody's injury is different. So everybody's level of capability is different. So Michael Johnson's capability and what he needed from the system was different than what Robert was. His injury was lower down, so he had more control over his torso. He needed less ability to support himself by holding the wheel. But he had a different feel that he needed from the throttle and the brake. Imagine doing throttle and gas and shifting and talking on the radio and hitting the drink button, and you have to do all of it with your hands. So the layout for that, whose their fingers were differently strengthened. So where Robert maybe could reach and hit a button with his thumb, Michael needed a trigger on the back of the wheel. And so it was just really fascinating to me to learn about that world. We don't talk about stuff like that. You don't. And to understand the daily challenges for him, like when the other drivers would wake up, and get ready in 30 minutes and head to the track, it's a process for Robert. It's an hours long process to just wake up and get ready to go somewhere. And to be there. And then I always get emotional because I remember we had a trailer, and we bought a ramp so that the drivers could get in and out of the trailer to change and to meet with their engineers and everything. And I noticed a couple times Robert just sitting outside the trailer at the bottom of the ramp. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, Michael's in there right now, and the aisle's not wide enough for us to pass.
Yeah.
I can't go in until he comes out. And I bought a different trailer.
Yeah.
A wider one. But and I apologize for getting emotional, but it's just like you don't you ignore certain things because they don't affect you. And when you see it in person and you understand the things that Robert or anybody in a similar situation has to overcome, just to live some kind of a level of life that you take for granted. For me, those are the things. The trophies are great, right? But what Robert taught me, and what I continue to kind of use as inspiration is really something else.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story, and he's a beautiful
sorry
guy.
for being a baby about it.
No,
I just
no,
still every time.
I was emotional interviewing him, and that's why we talked to him for an hour and a half, because in my mind, his story needs to be told, and more stories like his. And he is, he is truly something else.
His strength, right? You sense his strength. He as much as I got emotional just now.
Yeah,
I've never seen him get never once.
No,
no matter what the challenge, feel sorry for himself, express an emotion other than determination.
We talked to J.M. Carrera about 2 years ago too, and I was a complete mess interviewing him and listening to his story, and Formula 2 driver who has come back now, and he's incredibly stoic, and he said, look, I don't get emotional at this because it's my story. If I was listening to somebody else's story, that would be something else, but it's my story, and inspiring at every level. Do you think that Robert will one day drive the Indy 500 or the Le Mans series, or is that possible?
So, I mean, he is going to run in WeatherTech this year in sprint races in a Corvette in GTD. He's also gonna, we're planning on bringing him back with us to compete in the 24 Hours in the Nürburgring this year, which is something that a project we started last year, and unfortunately he had a big accident in a qualifying race and wasn't able to complete the licensing requirement, so he couldn't do the race itself. So that's something that is on the cards that we'll get to do with Robert. But because I've seen it firsthand, I would not put a limit on anything he could do in a race car.
Yeah.
I don't even think he knows where his limit is, but the fact that he's just willing to keep putting himself out there and keep taking on these bigger and newer challenges, I think many people would love to see any of those things happen. But I just, I'd love to see him. The goal for him has always been to return to top level racing, whether that's in a prototype or, GT car and winning and competing at the front, or an Indy car or Formula E or anything. I think he's capable of doing all those things. It's harder to find people who are willing to take that risk with him.
Well, you are, and you're an inspiration to him. You're an inspiration to the racing community, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck, Bryan, in your upcoming IndyCar season and all of the other things that you're involved in. And we'll see you in St. Petersburg for the start of it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Really loved being with you. Thank you, Bryan Herta.